Hello and welcome everyone to another Sales Hacker webinar. Thank you as always for hanging out with us. If this is your first Sales Hacker webinar, extra special, welcome. We are flattered that there's many things vying for your attention these days and flattered that you're going to spend the next hour with us. We're going to do our best to make it an extremely valuable hour of your time. And what we're talking about today is how to build adaptability in your sales team by coaching beyond the playbook. And we're going to wrestle with that from a number of different angles. And before I introduce my awesome guest, we have a perfect panel to wrestle with this topic. Super quick housekeeping, want to get it out of the way. Number one, these are all recorded. So if you do have to hop off, maybe you have to do some one-on-one coaching with your boss, or you have to give some coaching, it's okay. We'll have this in your inbox within about 24 hours. And then number two is these are meant to be interactive. I'm lucky enough that I would like to think that three of these people would jump on a call with me and we could wrestle with this behind closed doors. But we're doing this live very much for the community. So we want to hear from you. So if you don't mind going down into the chat right now, introduce yourself, your name, your title, the company you work for, and say hello, because it's always a lot more fun when we know who we're rocking with. And there is a Q&A section. So different than the chat, there's a Q&A section that I will be manning as well. So if you have any questions around anything that we're talking about, or you have some burning question that is completely unrelated, throw it in the Q&A. And we will try and get to as many as possible. So get those in as soon as you can. But that's it. That's all the boring stuff out of the way. Now I get to introduce my guests, starting with the Mary Shea. Mary, welcome to Sales Hacker. How's it going? I think you might be on mute. It wouldn't be a webinar if someone...
Yeah, first time on Zoom, what can I say? Anyway, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Excited to have you. So Mary Shea is a principal analyst at Forrester Research. But Mary, for those listeners who maybe aren't super familiar with Forrester or yourself, can you give a quick 2-3 minute backstory? I usually call it the superhero origin story of Mary Shea. Where'd you come from?
Yeah, well, I was a former professional oboist and musicologist and ethnomusicologist, and I sold a car to someone who worked at Forrester, and then I got recruited into the company, talked my way into a sales job, and was an inside sales rep for the first part of my career. Then I went off and grew up and did a lot of other things and came back to the company, and now I'm in the sales and marketing practice, and I spend my time writing future forward research on buying and selling and what that's going to look like, and some of the most innovative technologies that are going to support that process.
Wow. I truly thought you were like pulling my leg at the beginning of that story. I didn't know the full backstory. I thought you was like, that's an incredible story. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Everyone has a unique way that they sometimes find sales, and that's a cool.
So if anyone wants any car buying tips as well, I know there's a lot of transparency out there, but I'm happy to help.
Yeah, I like it. Awesome. All right, moving on. Also joined by Vlad Voskresensky. I should have asked you how to pronounce. Yeah, did I do it? Okay, nice. Vlad is the CEO and co-founder of Revenue Grid. Such a cool company. Vlad, how did you get to where you're at? What's the superhero origin story? And welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so my story is, I wouldn't say very unique. I have an engineering background. I used to be a software developer back then, and probably there are still some lines of a code which are running somewhere for someone, but I'm not sure. Because for the last 15 years, I'm in sales automation space. It was an evolutionary story because, at some point after developing the software ourselves, we've built with my partner a company which would do it as a service. And then we were running our CRM inside of a company and figured out that our sales rep doesn't really like it much. So that was the beginning of thinking how we can do better with CRM automation for us and beyond. And it ended up of a very nice journey for the last 15 plus years of trying hard to improve sales automation by any means and get as much value out of CRM and beyond as possible.
Very cool. Interesting. I'm excited we have you to bring the engineering element to this conversation. And last but definitely not least, joined by the one and only Justin Michael, founder at the Salesborgs. Justin, welcome, man.
Yeah, it's great meeting everyone. I'm Justin Michael. I host a community for sellers everywhere called Salesborgs, which is seller and cyborg. And the origin of that is I wanted to do Tony Stark and the Avengers, but the mouse is not favorable on IP. So I've sold a variety of things for 20 years, and I've gotten into the futurism game as a technologist, and I've done a lot of experiments with tech stacks, and I like to write about them. And so, yeah, I'm very excited about technologies like guided selling and sales engagement, and had some times at Salesforce and LinkedIn, and even worked for Sean Parker for a minute, and worked for a lot of really exciting cutting edge startups that were using artificial intelligence and machine learning, in many cases early in the market. So, yeah, excited to be here.
Very cool. Very cool. Incredible backstory, and just the person you want on a webinar like this to wrestle with this topic. And I will preface this conversation that we'll probably get into some somewhat technical stuff, some very forward-thinking ideas. I will probably get lost at some point. If you feel lost, it is good to ask those questions. It will only be helpful. But we're going to go, full steam ahead. I mentioned, Michael, you mentioned guided selling. I think this is a good place to start with the conversation. What is guided selling to you? Let's start by defining what that means.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I would try to maybe draw a parallel with those of you familiar with Einstein as it relates to Salesforce. We all use CRM. There's this idea of a full revenue chain, right? There's sales, marketing, operations. There's a full revenue life cycle, and there's all these enabling technologies now that string it together. What if there was a system that was smart, that was reading that data, that was crunching with machine learning algorithms that get smarter and looking at your deal flow, your signals in the CRM, your interactions in email? There's so many different data points across a revenue supply chain. And so this is technology to give you signals so that you can infer and predict and be smarter and sort of exceed the capabilities and limitations of your brain as a manager. Now, it's maybe easy to manage one person, but when you have a sales team of 50 and 50 pipelines and 50 opportunity queues, it becomes this giant mess. And sometimes hard for us to see what's happening. And so this technology is going to create efficiency and effectiveness to make reps stronger and managers stronger. I did my best, Vlad. I know you're the one of the experts on this topic.
Yeah, I like it. It's you going back to your Tony Stark. You mentioned the Avengers. It's almost like Jarvis, for your reps, right? For your suit. You got all this technology, and it's the thing that's helping you and coaching you through it. My question, but is guided selling, and Mary, maybe I'll go to you on this one, and then Vlad would love your thought. Is guided selling a technology or an idea? Could you use guided selling without the AI? Is it a methodology or is it a technology? Mary, what's your thoughts there?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Okay, no, Mary,
yeah, it's a great question. And we were riffing a little bit before this started, and I think everyone has a different definition for what guided selling means. And what that means to me broadly is that this is an emergent method and or emergent technology. I think that the technology is going to be an important component of guided selling. And when I think about it, I think about at its most simplistic way, think about intelligent virtual assistants, the chatbots, or even those bots that can help resolve a commission question or a quota question or a territory question internally really quickly. So taking that concept and starting to think about how to develop it in a more sophisticated way using natural language processing, automation, and deriving the insights from human behavioral activity, you're going to see, I think, tools and systems out there that can help sellers real time respond to tricky product questions, to respond to even just a general sentiment from the buyer and start to give cues and recommendations for how to move forward. I think one of the things I'm hearing is almost a conflation between guided selling and revenue intelligence, which we see revenue intelligence being a little bit also an emergent category, but being broader, looking at, sort of bringing the data and the insights, the strategy and the execution together across all of the activities of the revenue generation process. But I think today, when I think of guided selling, I think about a system or technology that is going to help a seller in a real-time conversation that's happening remote, interact quickly and efficiently, and deliver a better buyer experience. Justin mentioned effectiveness and efficiency, but I think one E that we often miss is experience. And ultimately, all of what we're doing is to deliver a better buying experience so that we have the commercial outcome that we want as sellers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great thoughts. And Vlad, I know you're ready with your thoughts on this too.
Yeah. And back to your point, is this a technology or more like an idea? I would say that that's the idea which is now by far ready to be automated, so that there is a space for technology in that. As an idea, we all are doing guided selling one way or the other. If you're a personal contributor and you just guide yourself, right? You know what your next step would be based on your experience, on the way you think it needs to be. So you are guiding yourself one way or the other. And you have a couple of opportunities you need to focus on. You make a decision. It is guided selling already. Now, if you think about that experience which tells you the next step, kind of obvious that the most experienced sales rep in the company is actually CRM, because CRM has seen it all, right? It knows all of the past pipeline. If you're doing good work, it knows all of the interactions about that past pipeline, either won or lost. So the question is, can you rely to that accumulated experience when you work on currently open pipeline? What that specific action or message or step you were doing back in the past, which led you to better result, or maybe not to so good result, and you want to avoid it going forward. So this is where, in my view, idea meets technology. Because if you crunch that data, if you analyze those data inputs, then you can come up with those meaningful observations, suggestions, signals, like Justin mentioned, which are helping sales reps to make next step in the right moment, and prioritize those steps, what I should be focused on. And I would respectfully disagree with Mary that revenue intelligence is kind of an umbrella on guided selling. I think that there are many aspects in guided selling which not necessarily an intelligence. It's a fairly simple statistical observation which already a basis for a signal, what needs to be done or not. It doesn't really need an intelligence. Intelligence is like, too strong word for that. For example, if your sales rep is saying that he's going to close that deal this month, but then you analyze conversations and you see that he has sent 5 follow-ups and got 0 response, you don't need an intelligence to challenge the statement that it's in the current month pipeline. Those things. So I think revenue intelligence and guided selling are very much coexist. Often people are actually, using both terms to define the same things, but that's the idea. Crunch the data and try to focus on what's important. Sometimes even finding out those things which are beyond your experience. You don't know that, but the technology can help you to focus on this, and you'll be like, really, that makes sense. Why not?
Yeah. Interesting take. Thank you for answering the question about idea versus technology, because my brain immediately went to kind of, before we got to the technology, like you said, we were doing this. We're just now at a point where we can actually automate it. I think of the early sales hacker days when we were lean, scrappy, small team. There wasn't all this technology. We used like virtual assistants, overseas to help guide some parts of the process. And now we're at a point with AI and machine learning that we can bake that in, which I think is so cool. Okay. My next question, how do we set the stage a little bit? Like, why are we talking about guided selling? Why now? And I think a good way to do that is, what are the problems that sales leaders are faced with right now? There's a whole slew of new ones. And so I want the three of you to think about this for 2 seconds. And then I want to do a poll as we're thinking about all the different problems, because there's hundreds. the poll I want to ask is because for me, the term guided selling hasn't broken out yet, at least in my little bubble. You hear it every now and again. Justin, we were talking, a lot of analysts seem to have it part of their terms. It hasn't made it to like a colloquial sales term yet, I don't think. So I want to know, of those joining us, are you using, have you used guided selling before? And I'm interested to see this response of the attendees without skewing the results. Mary, how do you think we're gonna fall on this one?
I think it's going to be very heavy on the no.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't want to skew the results. I've already been told I'm wrong once today, so bring it on.
I think in any good webinar, if you're not told you're wrong at least once or twice, then you're not with the right people.
Yeah, I agree. We like a little confrontation at Forrester. I like it, Vlad.
Absolutely. All right, we will stop the poll now. And Mary, this time you were definitely right. So we had 69% have never used guided selling, with only 31% saying yes. Justin,
I actually think that's really cool. I mean, because that's telling us a third of people have used it in some capacity or another. So I would be really interested to know, is it, sort of very, very tactical, sort of meeting scheduling, things of that nature, or something that's deeper in terms of, what I like to call an angel on the shoulder that's really helping a seller sell in motion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's ask that question. So for that third that said, yes, I've used guided selling, chat in your example. How are you using it today? It would be really, really interesting. Justin, your take on those results. What do they mean to you?
Well, I can't say I've had a tech stack that I use that has a fully baked out guided selling, within actually a SaaS company where I work. Now, I have been sitting in a hovercraft mode where I've gotten to use some of the players now, the leaders in guided selling worldwide, and get into the UI and the UX, but it is a little rare. Those feature sets might be in there. It might be called something else. It might be a piece of guided selling, but I would almost say no. Like, I'm sitting in there and say, here, go to this window and do the guided selling piece, or had a sales manager sit down with me. So, ironically, from a user level, no. From an analyst and consultant level, yes.
Yeah, cool. Vlad, what is that? What you're seeing in the market? About a third are using guided selling, or is this a little bit skewed right now? What are you thinking?
So I'm positively surprised by the responses, but I do assume that it actually, people meant that not necessarily they were using tools which are automating guided selling. It's more like an idea. Sure, we do that. Yeah. I mean, yeah, sure.
Yeah, we've got some people jumping in saying we take the spin selling approach as well as gap selling. So kind of putting it as more of like a methodology. I would consider those, methodologies. Both great methodologies. Gap selling is awesome. Okay, let's dive into it. What problems do sales leaders face today? We'll keep it to like 3 each, because we could probably spend the rest of the time on this slide. Mary, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, well, I would just rhetorically say, what problems do they not have? So, I mean, when you're the top sales position, every day is full of problems and massive headaches, and it's all about constant problem solving and stakeholder management and all kinds of different things. But in this unique environment, I think there's a couple of them. Buyers are evolving faster than selling organizations can keep up with. Selling organizations are shrinking in size, so about 40% of businesses have had to reduce the size of their sales force as a result of COVID-related economic challenges. And then I think the third piece is margin is something that the top sales leader is going to have to really start focusing on now. In the past, particularly in the tech space, it was all about top line. And now we're seeing the data that show sales leaders are increasingly put on the hook, not just for top line, but also for margin growth as well. And I think that's a new challenge. So it's a challenge that, if you want to hit more top line, you can't just go out and get another body, right? You're going to have to be a little bit more savvy about strategic tooling and a range of other strategies.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting last point that you meant that you pointed out there. I think a lot of us over the last leaders got like quote unquote tool drunk and thought that would solve all their problems. Let's get more bodies, more tools, throw more money, and then look, more money is coming in. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that's efficient revenue growth in any way. Great point, Vlad. What are you seeing? You talked to a lot of sales leaders at Revenue Grid. What are some of the major problems that they're facing today?
Okay, so I would say that the good leaders are having problems like, am I gonna hit my numbers? Is my team doing the right work and things like that? But the visionary leaders, they actually go beyond that. And I would say that the problem they think they have, and it's a very right thinking, is what else is going on and I can improve something which I don't know yet. Is there something which goes beyond my experience, beyond my knowledge? So that's why I need to attend webinars or panel discussions like that one, or maybe I need to go and educate myself, or maybe I need to dig in my data, maybe I don't know something, maybe I need to listen all of my sales calls. What is the knowledge I can get out of something which may improve the results, besides what I already know? And that's really the visionary sales leader's problem. And the better answer you have to that, the more distinguished you are from your competitors, I would say.
Yeah. There's levels to these problems. There's the right problems you should be having and the wrong problems you should be having almost. Some problems you will always have as sales leader. Justin, what are you seeing out there in the market? You're kind of immersed in and surrounded by a lot of sales leaders every day.
As far as the challenges?
Correct, yeah. Challenges and problems.
Right, so one of the challenges is just the neocortex, right? The Dunbar number, 150. It's being a sales manager, these systems get Byzantine, this word, Byzantium, like complex to death. You've got your Salesforce files a mess. You've got, 5 million in the pipe, 10 million in the pipe. You're running a 3x pipeline. You go in and you do a forecast report and you've got aging on these deals, 300 days stage, 150 days, notes in there. It's switched from one AE to another. There's different stakeholders. You go in to look at an opportunity that's still being called for next quarter. The stakeholders are gone. Like the human brain can only manage like 150 things. And so the manager can't see into the pipeline and understand the health of the pipeline to even be able to coach against it. So that's, I think, a really big thing is visibility. We talk about, and then prescience, like being alerted before it's a huge problem, like why is that deal aging and who's involved. So there's having some kind of predictive analysis. How I feel a lot is that the rep and the manager, there's a lot of hope in the pipe and everybody's just speeding up into a brick wall, but have no idea there's a hurricane coming. So mixing metaphors, but that the lack of visibility seems to be a big one, having been a manager and rep in SaaS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lack of visibility is huge. The ever-growing complexity as you scale, and then the ability to coach against in like real time, which doesn't seem to happen too much. And that's one of the things we wanted to talk about, is that there hasn't been much, at least in my sales career, much shift in coaching. Right? You probably have a one-on-one with your manager. Why do you think that is, Vlad? Why have we not seen any major shifts in coaching when we now have some of these technologies that, I think of when you're coached at those inflection points, like right when you're about to lose a deal or something, and you're like, and then it like works, that's going to stay with you forever. But if you dissect the deal later or a week later, might not necessarily stick with you as much. It's like, yeah, okay, let's get through this one-on-one and move on. Why has there been no major shifts in coaching? What do you think about that? And do you agree?
Is that one for me?
Yeah, Justin, go ahead.
A double, thank you.
You're welcome.
So here's the thing. It's like, I don't know, this is kind of funny, but there's a huge investment in marketing technology, huge investment. And I sometimes question, like, one marketing event can be $25,000. But if we got to get a sales rep, a tool that's $100 a month, oof, white knuckles, like we can't do that, And so we're under investing in not only the tooling, but in the coaching and the training and the reinforcement. And then just sometimes coaching gets, short shrift. It's like down the priority list. And then there's just not a lot of enablement around it or technology enablement to the coaching because a lot of the technology is being spent on weaponization of the funnel, more emails, more calls, more. So I think that once the C-level start investing in not only technology to weaponize the sales funnel, but enable and train and reinforce that, and that's where like sales enablement and technology sales enablement, that nexus point is coming together. So that's exciting for guided selling, in my view.
Do you think that we're going to see over the years some of that, because MarTech budgets are huge and then market events are huge? Do you think some of that is going to start spilling over into sales? I mean, it already has, but do you think that trend's going to continue?
I'm going to quote Vlad from Aragon Research in his Forbes Council article, which is the sales tool space will grow to a $5 billion valuation in the next couple of years. We're also going to see an explosion of sales development reps. 40% of those reps roll to marketing and demand gen, 60% to sales. And so those reps will get the benefit of those marketing budgets, and it's going to switch to sales tooling. The big rounds that just happened for Outreach 50 mil with Salesforce in it, and the one for Sales Law for 100 mil are evidence of that Aragon prediction. I'm throwing it back over to you, Vlad and Mary.
Thanks for quoting. Yeah, that's the figures from Aragon, not even from me. But I totally agree. Well, first of all, I agree with the statement that coaching didn't change much, and my a technology background that answer to that would be that probably that's not a lot of tools with kind of a feedback, because I mean it's super nice to do the coaching when you get the sense how does it really help. What happens, like we know for sure from a lot of the researches that good leaders are actually spending a lot of effort on coaching. Either they do it themselves or they invite experts and consultants to do the coaching. But the problem though is that you never know for sure what part of coaching helped you or maybe didn't help. So the technology here is definitely to help at least to measure that. That's a very nice first step. Then you can improve on top of it. And that's, I see the evolutional way, which is guided selling can help a lot. But yeah, to be able to provide nice coaching, you have to have that immediate feedback. Okay, that helped, that didn't help. And another big aspect to that, it's I think we all would prefer that coaching would be very contextual, not like I go and listen for some educational sessions and then I go back to real life, which is totally different from what I've heard about. But, here you go. But
there we go.
To be somehow very, very connected, and a nice technology on the background can make those connections, can actually, out of the big pile of those recommendations, suggestions, lessons, can pick the one which you need right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Mary, you just had a comment which I strongly agree with. Sales tools are having the moment that MarTech had in 2009. I agree with that. We saw the absolute explosion. You can see the MarTech and sales tech landscapes are starting to look the same now. It's pretty wild. What do you mean by that? Just to break it down.
Yeah, so I mean, back in 2009, marketing was having the moment. There were a bunch of different point solution providers for marketing automation. There was a ton of consolidation, and billion-dollar valuations. And I think Justin just alluded to the heat that we're seeing in terms of the valuations on the sales tech side right now. And I think we'll continue to see that for the next 24 months. Companies are getting funded. There's a need like never before for these types of solutions. But I do want to sort of harken back to something you said earlier, Scott, which is, you can throw all the people at it, you can throw all the technology at it. It's really more about being really strategic about how you do it, because now we're starting to see a movement toward sort of the platformization of some of these tools and a movement away from a lot of point solutions and point solution providers, where companies are looking to scale back and focus on cost savings. 38% of B2B sales leaders say their second most important initiative is cost savings after driving growth. So I think there's going to be a push from the market to some of these big players out there that Justin alluded to provide more functionality and capability around everything that the seller needs to do as part of the entire cycle, whether that's the internal preparation and learning in advance, learning in the moment, or orchestrating your cadence and delivering your communication through the best channel for the buyer. So I think it's a very, very exciting time to do what we all do.
Certainly is. We're all very, very lucky, and I've been grateful to. It feels like almost like grow up alongside sales tech. It's been cool and a heck of a journey. Okay, Mary, I want to go back to you in the context of coaching. There seems to be like this issue right now where you can have your one-on-one and maybe your coaching helped and maybe it didn't, and we can't directly attribute an outcome with proper coaching. How do you see that shifting in the near future, and then maybe a far off prediction of how coaching will evolve so we can actually see if it's working and it's not just a helpful therapy session with your reps every now and again.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many dynamics. I mean, culturally, I think going back to your early question, why hasn't coaching taken off? Because most sales managers came up through individual contributor roles, right? And they don't know how to do it. That's one thing. And it's been deprioritized by organizations. But as you start to think of the future sales organization, it's going to be much more nimble. It's going to be leaner, agile. You're not going to have sort of the 80-20 rule where 20% of your people are going to deliver 80% of your revenue. You're going to flatten that out so that you're going to get your revenue from 80 to 90% of your people, which means you've got to have increased consistency across every activity. The challenge is I think there were some great methodologies that were put in the chat spin, and there's value selling, and there's a range of others that we've all participated in. The problem is there's no retention and there's no data capture from that. And everything going forward, I think, is going to be focused on data. So as a sales leader, I want to see more than just completions. I want to see what types of coaching and training has this individual been given. How frequently is my manager coaching? What kind of coaching is that? And I need to extract that data and roll it up to the sales pipeline and start to understand where I'm getting lift and where I'm getting downside, and do more of what works and less of what doesn't work. So I think the ability to use systems around coaching is going to be really important for retention and a range of other reasons, but the data will be really crucial. And I think it's been really soft. Like, you could never really ascertain whether coaching had an impact or not. And that was sort of a gut level. You'd have to sort of make a gut level assessment as head of sales. We're moving away from those types of determinations, focusing on really data. I don't know. Yeah. I'd be really interested in what some of the other panelists think.
Yeah. Who wants to kick it off? Vlad, let's start with you, because Justin, I know you're typing away. You've got some thoughts, and I want to get to them shortly too. But Vlad, what are your thoughts? How are we going to move away? Because I agree, Mary, like from this, he or she is a great sales leader because they hit their number, but does that mean they're a great coach? What specifically are they good at? How can we help them to and foster better leaders that can then have a trickle down kind of effect?
Right. Obviously, the data here is the king, because if you analyze more data sources, you can get to more meaningful observations, if you would. But even simple approach to the direct result of that coaching moment, like I advised you, or technology advised you to do that. You did this, and what results it brought, and then you can repeat this through the future pipeline, the same type of recommendations, and you value that. So technically, like, what are the KPIs of those suggestions or educational moments, and what are the OKRs even? What kind of objective key results you're expecting? So if you approach your coaching from that standpoint, it's already some measures on your coaching style, first of all. And then I'm again back to those context aspect of coaching. It's really important to understand in what context the coaching is being given, because I've read once a very nice report which said like more than 80% of the content which sales reps are getting through educational sessions is actually being lost, and they're forgetting this within a month or a couple of months after the sessions. And to me, it's all about contextual use of that knowledge they're getting. So I think that, that feedback from a system or a process would be way more valuable if we associate it with the context. There's a very nice example which I love, and it's actually one of our customers told us that, so I'll steal that example, and I love it to death. He said, like, look, if you are in the plane before the takeoff and we're listening to that coaching on how to buckle up and what to do with those masks, etc., we don't pay really attention to that because, come on, it happens all the time. But now imagine if you are getting that coaching when you are flying already and hit turbulence and those masks are falling, and what your level of attention would be and what the value of the coaching would be. So this is a very nice example of how context is important, and I feel like a lot of coaching we're doing right now as a sales leader is happening disconnected from the context. If we bridge that gap, the results will be way better.
That was an incredible example. I'm going to most definitely steal that one. That's a good one. Not only will you pay attention more as the plane is going down, but it's going to be like burned in your brain, that learning when you're actually going through.
You'll definitely remember. You will remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. I like it. Justin, what are your thoughts on this? I know you had some thoughts in the chat.
Yeah, I want to be respectful of time too, but I just want to say that one of the most difficult things as a manager is to manage by leading indicators instead of lagging indicators. And I think it was Jason Jordan who said there's 316 KPIs possible in a Salesforce reporting grid, and like under 20 are influence revenue, and revenue is a lagging indicator. And so one of the big things when you show up to do a coaching session, you have the weekly pipeline review as a regional sales manager, which I was. You have to ask on what they think about the deal and walk them through, and their information is imperfect, and they put some notes down, and they don't look inside any systems. It's fully qualitative and hearsay. So the manager can now, and the rep can be armed with hard data, like Mary and Vlad were saying, so you can see you're single threaded in that account. You didn't follow up on time. It's been 36 days actually since you send them an email. It's not going to close next week, right? So you can have these reports that come out before you meet, and you can be a little more savvy and ahead of the curve. So I love the idea of leading indicators across the board as a management science, but any technology that could unlock that to simplify what to coach on, then people can be prepared for the coaching session. There's a lot of winging it, especially like you said about ICs that they're awesome because they just fly by the seat of their pants because they've been doing it for 20 years. But then when they get into coaching, they just sort of like, where's the revenue? Try to motivate you. And they're not coaching from a place of a data-driven approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so going to the chat. Calvin, you have better questions than I do. I love this question, so I'm going to pose it to the whole group. Calvin says, parallel topic. This is an interesting one. Do you see a further blending of sales and marketing processes and duties as a result of current trends? I'm with an early stage SaaS startup, and our sales reps are being asked to learn MailChimp to run their own campaigns and create content with justification that sales reps know what resonates with clients versus the marketing team. Wondering if this is a result of being with a small startup or the demand of the market. Mary, you feel strongly that this blend will continue?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I think Justin mentioned it earlier when he said SDRs, or I prefer to call them front of the cycle reps. Many of them, 40% of them, are now reporting into marketing. And the reason is because marketing can provide the tools and the methods that are going to enable them to do their job, because essentially those front of the cycle reps are micro marketers. So I think we're seeing a blending and blurring of roles. Just like buyers don't really care what you're called. They want to talk to people across the entire cycle, and they want continuity and consistency and a flexibility to transact on whatever route they want. So I think on the internal side, you're seeing a blurring of roles between marketing and sales and some crossover. And then ultimately, I think we'll see the separate sales operations and revenue operations roles go away, as you really need to have more of that 360-degree omni-channel view of all your customer activities through connected systems. You'll have revenue operations that's going to manage the technology, not the CRM, and the processes and the methods across the revenue generation machine. So we really think that's heading there. And I think as a small SaaS, you have the ability to experiment more than some of the enterprise companies where it's kind of like the Titanic to make those changes. So it sounds like he's off to the right direction. Calvin's off to the right direction.
Absolutely. I feel very strongly and passionate about this. You said sellers need to become micro marketers. This is something that I essentially kind of built my career on. I was a seller, but I started creating all these videos. I taught myself, Canva, so I could make my own dynamic content. And it's not only putting a beacon up by creating content, a beacon up for your prospects to also come and find you. But you're able to do a level of personalization that many can't. So yes, Calvin, you're on the right track and keep rolling with it. Mary, actually, I want to ask you a follow-up question. What is your thoughts on companies that are putting parameters around that, right? Where there's okay, maybe we don't want each seller because we want the control. We don't want each seller to be able to create their own decks or go create content on LinkedIn, and they're trying to put boxes around it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, historically, marketers are about exhibiting control, right? Control over the brand, control over the content, control over the edits. And I think Justin maybe once used this phrase with me once, the cat's out of the bag. Or maybe it was you. I can't remember. Someone did. But, I think there has to be company and brand consistency. And that's where some of these solutions come in, the content management solutions like you have with the ability to access content very quickly and within brand or regulatory requirements as a seller, you have the ability to edit. I think that's where some of the training has to come in, and there has to be alignment in working really closely with marketing. But, at the end of the day, there's so many tools that are out there that can enable sellers to really go out there and put forth their own thought leadership and their own ideas. But there is the pull to have brand consistency, and I think that's where you need to partner with marketing and have tools that can help give sellers the freedom they need to engage effectively in this marketplace, but to make sure the message is consistent even across a widely distributed sales force.
Yeah. And maybe there's a world in the far future where these two ideas we're talking about kind of merge, where guided selling could be the one that's giving some of the parameters around the things that you're and content you're creating as a seller. Justin, going to you on this same topic. So I think there was really two. Do you see a further blending of sales and marketing process and duties? And then the follow-up, what is your view on some companies putting parameters on it? I know a lot of interesting companies that I would be that are, I think, tying their left foot behind their back, or that's not the right saying. I don't know. they're tying their sellers' arms behind their back by not letting them create. What's your thoughts there?
Yes. So the precedent was in the early days of social media, a very famous social media practitioner did one tweet and was let go of a famous company. So there is governance of what you can write, and sometimes you do have to run it by the legal team or the PR team or the marketing team. But I've seen pretty progressive marketing teams that are in close touch with the SDRs and letting them flex. The other big thing is this: we all talk about the money ball of sales, but then we have SDRs and AEs. And if you have a 2-position binary system, it's bowling. You have a ball and pins. Baseball has 9 positions, and soccer has, I don't know, Vlad, you got to help me out. I'm it's not 2, so it's really hard to have
11.
Is it 11? Yeah, so it's really hard to have Moneyball. I think of the Chinese game of Go, when it's infinite permutations because of the amount of things. So the minute you allow gifted humans to do mixes of marketing, sales, operations, and play, and now that maybe it's a 20% rotational program, or someone who's a talented seller also does a YouTube channel. We've seen this happen, right? With Beck Holland and Flip the Script on for Chorus. When that happens, though, and there's interdisciplinary positioning instead of binary, that's where also Moneyball's possible and the guided selling really takes flight. So I think there's going to be a reimagining. We're 20 years in SaaS now. Cisco and Salesforce hit 50 million ARR in the cloud in 2002. And there's never been a reimagining of predictable revenue. It's just been SDRAE in an industrial complex. Technologies like guided selling, I think, will unlock not only what reps can do, but also how we define the roles. Because the data will say, oh, this rep actually does need a micro market, or we need, there'll be things that it yields that changes the requisition and the bullet points of what the job is.
Yeah. And Justin, does that lead to more role specialization or more generalization? Because I could see it actually going either way.
In my opinion, the megatrends are subspecialization and consolidation, which is the immediate view, because it's very hard to shatter the prevailing model of what the positions are. So it's more likely that an SDR now is doing just social selling all day, or just the cold calls all day, or there's a research analyst. It's like 31 flavors of SDRs. And I want to credit Aaron Ross with this analogy, and also the unique genius, because I interviewed him and he talked about this. But there's some unique technologies which are allowing further specialization of exactly what that rep is doing. And then consolidation is through the technology layer, that the technology platforms, it's no longer 3-point solutions. You'll need to buy one platform that, records your calls, analyzes your coaching, predicts, does automation. It has to, CFOs don't want to pay $5,000 per head per month. They want something that does it all in one.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Vlad, you've been waiting there patiently. What are your thoughts on this topic?
So I want to go back to exact that phrase which Mary said and underline it, like boldly underline that. I think it's not about sales and marketing. It's actually about revenue generation activities, which goes beyond sales and marketing. So partnership management, customer success management. You think of, right? So my vision of a bright future, and I believe it's someday will happen. It's like I'm a sales rep, and then I'm trying to close this opportunity, and my playbook tells me that the next step is that. That's the experience we have accumulated. That's what we put in our playbook. Now, the ABM tool from marketing tells me that, those guys are evaluating one of our competitors. They're checking G2 crowd listing, and these are the guys which are doing that. So maybe here is the marketing collateral right now to share with those guys. At the same time, there are already our customers on some other product, and maybe CSM system tells me that they have some open tickets which we didn't yet close. So better we focus on that first before I start pitching them something new. And I'm being surrounded by those inputs which are leading me to, as a human being, a decision, but they're hinting me what the decision could be based on as many signals I can get. And I completely agree that at some point, sales reps can transform the marketing message better and feel better how to reach out people through the cold calling email rather than marketers, which know the general message. Or sometimes it's vice versa. So it's all about collaboration and melding, blending this together. So back to your point, Scott, I think it's going to be more specialized people who focus on what they know the best, but those guys needs to collaborate together. And if technology can help, that will speed up their velocity because it will be automated. If not, then it's human being need to collaborate, but they have to. Otherwise, it's just falling apart.
Yeah. I agree with that. That we're going to see this, like the collapse of sales ops, revenue ops will kind of reign supreme over the full funnel. And it's always remarkable to me. I get to interact with a lot of high growth companies. How few people in an organization understand the full funnel, that are looking at the full funnel. They're all so concentrated on their KPIs. Understandably, that's what they're there to do. And things like this will hopefully change that and give everyone insight into more areas of the organization. All right, I want to go to a quick question from the audience. Great question here. Great conversation. How is this all going to affect the buyer's experience from the buyer's end? How is this going to affect them? I can only think it's going to be positive. I'm going to have a more personalized, tailored experience. It's going to feel more like it does in like B2C, where I only interact with people when I need them, and it's like self-serve component, but also I'll have people that are giving me insights I can't get anywhere else. I can't just Google. How do you think, Mary? We'll start with you. how do you see this changing the buyer's experience, and is there anything we should maybe watch out for?
Yeah, so I think the buyer is driving a lot of these changes, and concurrently, you're seeing technologies like AI and automation mature pretty rapidly right now, where they're at the point where they can deliver more meaningful business outcomes in a B2B selling scenario. I think that, why do anything unless it's going to deliver a better experience for the buyer? And I think the buyer has been struggling with less than perfect experiences. I think I go back to just like all the outreach that I get as an analyst, where people, are DMing me through LinkedIn or Twitter and asking me if I want to do a demo or how my CRM solution's working. And I'm like, I don't have a budget. I'm an analyst. Why wouldn't you know that? So it's such a bad experience. So I actually think that what we're talking about today is going to enhance the buyer experience tremendously and provide personalization, hyper-specialization that the buyer really desires and expects from their interactions in consumer marketplace.
Yeah.
I think one other really quick point to add is that you talked a little bit about self-service and the buyers doing more and more on their own. Right now, the research we have shows that sellers are only engaged in actual buying conversations for about 16% of their time. So as buyers get more and more self-sufficient and they start to use self-service tools, whether that's, interactive demos or virtual reality or augmented reality, you're going to see sales be involved in less and less of the conversation. And what they're going to have to do is up the game to remain integral to that conversation as they get a smaller piece of the mindshare pie.
Yeah. Great point. Okay, I want to quickly go through this deck. We have 8 minutes left, and I want to ask one, because there's another great question that's kind of general and open enough that we can really dissect each one of your brains. So quickly moving through the deck, there is some interesting stats that I want to make sure we share about how many, so we talked about this, correlating success with specific action. This one's super interesting. So, Vlad, where did these stats come from?
These are from the analyst agencies. One is from Forrester and one, I believe, is from Gartner.
Yeah. 60% of companies will switch to guided selling by 2025. That is wild. So if this is not on your radar and this webinar did not put guided selling on your radar, get on it now. We will be seeing a major shift. 51% of sales orgs have already deployed or plan to deploy guided selling. So don't care who you are, if you're an individual contributor or you're a leader joining us, start talking about this with your team if it's not already there. And moving on to the last one, and then if you are interested in checking out guided selling, of course, Revenue Grid, absolute pros at this. You can go check that out. But this brings us to a perfect question to kind of tie this all together. And we talked about a lot of them, but this question is, what are the 3 biggest trends you're seeing in sales in 2021? If you can only say 3 or underscore 3 that we talked about in this, what would those be? And Justin, let's start with you.
3 biggest trends for guided selling?
Just in sales for 2021.
I think in 2021, it's an interesting idea if you're manually sending emails or manually making calls, because the technology to be able to automate that is coming way down. I think another huge trend we're seeing is that the B2C-ification of B2B. Because of companies like Google and Amazon and Facebook that have ultra simple interfaces, B2B has to become more like B2C in the way it serves the customers, the UI, the UX, and especially the concise way in which everything is short form, from TikTok to Snap to now Clubhouse with its audio only. Those are 2 mega trends. And the third is the ascension of the writers. Being able to write effectively in the 2020s is the edge. If you actually just look at the LinkedIn feed at the sales leaders or companies that are dominating, it's because they're kind of mastering the LinkedIn algos. So like powerful writing is winning in digital. Those are my three. I'm curious what Vlad and Mary think.
I really like those. First off, I think powerful writing is massive. I think it's the way you interface with the platform. So it's like the most important thing right now. So I want to underscore that. And I do. You said something there that kind of made me think. If all these systems are going to have to get much more simple to use, like all of sales. I think there's a world where we barely even interface, like it's all just running in the background, and it's helping us do the things that need to get done. Like I had a shower thought the other day of like, why don't we have CRMs for our everyday life? Like that would be super helpful. And it's because Salesforce isn't easy enough to use. You couldn't pick it up. You get frustrated in the 20 minutes that consumers want to figure something out, and they get frustrated and leave it. So I think that trend is going to happen to B2B, where everything will just be so unbelievably easy to use, the whole no-code movement, all of this stuff. Vlad, what are your three biggest trends you're seeing in 2021?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest would be to get more value out of a CRM data. Just like you've said, CRM, it's a database, and getting actionable insights out of it. It was a trend, it will be a trend, and it will probably continue, and evolve beyond 2021. So literally trying to understand not only the status of now, which is forecast, report, dashboard, but the status of tomorrow and why, and how can I influence that. So this is the really big trend, and it's data-driven sales automation, if you would, and beyond that. So that's the one. Another one, beyond even automation, I would say that, working with a lot of sales leaders, we see the attitude of their behavior for the current year, and it's like COVID, post-COVID time. We see a lot of companies are trying to focus on existing pipeline and squeezing out the deals out of existing pipeline. And I think, kind of unfortunately, but that's going to be a trend for 2021. It's harder to get new business for many, many companies. So they're trying to come back to existing pipeline, existing relationship with their prospects, and try to figure out how they can get better results out of that. And that would be the trend in attitude, if not in sales automation, I would say. So these are the main aspects I see for 2021.
Yeah. That's a good point there. I'm seeing that as well. A lot of companies going and, using like a land and expand model and looking for more cross-sell, upsell, as it's harder to get kind of net new. That's awesome. Mary, take us home with your final three trends that you see in 2021.
Yeah, but so we see so many different trends, and I think everyone's mentioned really solid ones, and I would agree with them. I'll take a step back and say I thought 2020, before I was aware of COVID, was going to be the year of putting the humanity back in selling, even though our research showed that buyers were more and more engaging with digital. They were also bringing in the human seller for connections, and then we had COVID, and here we are, talking to each other in each other's home, and it's a deeper level of humanity that I think has happened. For 2021, I think we're going to finally see a real buyer-first mentality in terms of how successful organizations go to market and operationalize their sales strategy. I think we're going to see sellers who can master the art of synchronous and asynchronous video creation and delivery are going to crush their quota. And I think that issues such as diversity, equity, and inclusion and culture within B2B organizations is going to become important and criteria that buying committees are going to look at when they choose partnering with large organizations. And I think, historically we've seen that very focused on the B2C brands with Nike and Coach and a variety of other brands. I think we're starting to see that creep into the B2B world, where organizations and supplier organizations are going to have to take some kind of a principled stand on where they are in social issues.
Mm-hmm. I love that last one. I think conscious capitalism is the only way forward, or call it what you want. But yeah, everyone's going to be more conscious with where their dollars and their money is flowing, and they want to support organizations that are diverse, care about social change, environmental change, all of these issues. And that's cool. then it gives a deeper meaning to all this stuff that we're doing in this cool world that we all get to be in sales tech. Well, Justin, Vlad, Mary, that was a lot of fun for me. I know we had some great engagement from the community. We'll have to have the three of you back. You are all three such a wealth of knowledge. So thank you for spending the time with us today. And for all those who hung out, we'll see you on another Sales Hacker webinar.